I never thought I'd feel jealous watching someone else's mom make dinner, but there I was, frozen in Tessa's kitchen doorway, watching Mrs. Monroe teach her daughter how to properly dice an onion. The way she guided Tessa's hands, laughing at her daughter's exaggerated tears from the fumes, it hit me like a punch to the gut. My name's Lila, and I've spent 18 years pretending I was fine with how things were in my family. But something about that simple moment between Tessa and her mom cracked something open inside me that I couldn't close again. "You're holding the knife too flat, honey," Mrs. Monroe said, adjusting Tessa's grip. "There you go. Now you won't slice your fingers off." She kissed the top of Tessa's head and I had to look away. "Earth to Lila," Tessa called out. "You gonna help us with this curry or just stand there looking tragic?" I forced a smile and stepped into their warm, chaotic kitchen. Counter was covered in half-chopped vegetables, and something aromatic simmered on the stove. It was so different from my house, where takeout containers and pristine and used appliances ruled the kitchen. "Sorry, just zoned out for a second," I said, grabbing a knife. "What do you need me to do?" Mrs. Monroe handed me a pile of bell peppers. "These need to be julienne, that means thin strips, sweetie. And tell me how that college application process is going. Your mother mentioned you were looking at state?" I focused on the pepper, carefully removing the seeds. "Actually, I'm thinking about taking a gap year. Maybe work for a while, figure things out." I waited for the lecture about wasting potential, the one my parents had already given me twice this week. Instead, Mrs. Monroe just nodded. "That's perfectly reasonable. Sometimes we need time to find our path." She squeezed my shoulder as she passed, and I nearly cut myself from the unexpected gesture. My phone buzzed, probably my mother reminding me about dinner. I'd been avoiding going home lately, making excuses to stay at Tessa's or the library. Anything to dodge another silent meal where the only sounds were forks scraping plates and my father's occasional comments about his dental practice. "Stay for dinner?" Tessa asked, reading my mind as usual. "Mom always makes too much anyway." Before I could answer, my phone buzzed again. This time it was a text from my father. "Family meeting tonight. Mandatory. 7 p.m. sharp." "Can't," I said, showing Tessa the text. "Apparently, we're having a family meeting." "Ooh, sounds serious," Tessa waggled her eyebrows. "Maybe they're finally getting you that pony you asked for when you were 7. I forced a laugh, but something felt off. My parents didn't do family meetings. They did carefully scheduled appointments and efficiently managed conversations, usually about my academic performance or career trajectory. "I should head out," I said, washing my hands. "Thanks for letting me help with dinner, Mrs. Monroe." "Anytime, sweetheart. You're always welcome here." She gave me a quick hug and I had to blink back sudden tears. The walk home felt longer than usual. Our house stood dark and imposing against the evening sky, every window dark except for my father's study. Through the glass, I could see him on the phone, pacing with that focused expression he got when closing a deal or planning an investment. My mother's car wasn't in the driveway yet, but her text had confirmed she'd be home for the meeting. Whatever this was about, it was big enough to disrupt her usual late nights at the office. I stood at the bottom of our perfect stone walkway, looking up at our perfect house with its perfect landscaping, and felt something shift inside me. Whatever was coming, whatever this meeting was about, I had a feeling it would change everything. Taking a deep breath, I started up the path, the smell of Tessa's family's curry still clinging to my clothes. A reminder of everything I didn't have waiting for me behind that heavy front door. The family meeting turned out to be more of an execution, just with expensive wine instead of a last meal. My parents sat across from me at our formal dining table, their faces wearing the same expression they used when firing household staff. "We're moving to Switzerland," my father announced, swirling his wine like this was a casual dinner conversation. "I've accepted a position with an international dental consortium. Your mother will be heading their PR department." I waited for the rest, the part about my college plans, about where I'd be living. The silence stretched until I realized they weren't going to say it. I had to ask, "When do we leave?" My mother's perfectly manicured fingers tapped against her wine glass. We leave in 3 weeks. You, however, will not be joining us. The words hit like ice water. What? You're 18 now, Lila, my father said, his tone practical. Old enough to start building your own life. We've arranged for your trust fund to become accessible. And there's enough there for a modest apartment and living expenses while you attend university. I stared at my mother, searching for any hint of emotion. She met my gaze with the same detached interest she showed during charity galas. This is an opportunity for you to develop independence, she said. We've provided everything you need to succeed. Everything except parents who gave a damn. When were you planning to tell me? Or was this meeting my notice to vacate? My voice came out steadier than I felt. Don't be dramatic, my father sighed. We're giving you 3 weeks to make arrangements. That's more than generous. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the hardwood. Right. Generous. Like abandoning your kid is some kind of gift. We're not abandoning you, my mother's voice sharpened. We're treating you like the adult you are. Many young people would be grateful for this level of financial support. I laughed, the sound harsh in our too-perfect dining room. Yeah, I'm sure lots of kids dream of being bought off so their parents can start a new life without them. Moving toward the stairs, I heard my father call out, "Where are you going?" We haven't finished discussing the arrangements. I'm going to pack, I shot back. Wouldn't want to waste any of your generous 3-week notice. In my room, I grabbed my laptop and started searching for apartments, my vision blurring. A notification popped up, an email from my mother, already forwarding contact information for realtors and financial advisors. Of course. They'd probably had this planned for months. My phone buzzed with a text from Tessa. How was the family meeting? Everything okay? Before I could respond, I noticed an envelope that had fallen from my mother's home office while I was storming upstairs. The address caught my eye. It was to my Aunt Marge, my mother's estranged sister who we never discussed. The letter was unsealed. I knew I shouldn't read it, but at this point, what more could they do to me? The contents made my hands shake. Marjorie, I know you'll never forgive me for what happened with David. I live with that choice every day. But now that Graham and I are leaving, I need you to watch over Lila. She has too much of him in her, that same softness that made David so vulnerable. I can't protect her from that anymore. Who was David? And what choice was my mother living with? A knock at my door made me shove the letter under my pillow. My father stood there, holding a folder. These are the documents you'll need, he said, placing them on my desk. The realtor can show you properties starting tomorrow. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. But of what? Dad, I started, but he was already turning away. Get some rest, Lila. You have a lot to arrange in the next few weeks. I sat on my bed, the mysterious letter burning under my pillow, my phone buzzing with Tessa's concerned messages, and realized I had 2 choices. I could do what I'd always done, follow their plans, be the perfect daughter even in abandonment, or I could finally start asking the questions they never wanted me to ask. Starting with finding out who David was and what my mother had done to him. The Moonlight Cafe wasn't my first choice for a job. But beggars can't be choosers when they're racing against a 3-week deadline to build an independent life. Leo Hargrove, the owner, hired me on the spot, his smile a little too warm as he showed me around the kitchen. Such a shame about your parents, he said, demonstrating how to work the espresso machine. I knew your mother back in high school. She was different then. The way he said different made me look up sharply, but his expression gave nothing away. Everyone in this town seemed to have secrets about my family except me. Different how? I asked, trying to sound casual while steaming milk. Leo shrugged, but his eyes held mine a moment too long. People change. Sometimes for good reasons. He glanced at the clock. Take your break. We should talk about your situation. In his office, Leo leaned back in his chair, studying me. You know, I have an apartment above the cafe. Previous manager lived there. It's sitting empty now. My heart jumped. The real estate agent had shown me nothing but overpriced dumps all week. Really? Could be yours. Reduced rent for an employee, of course. He smiled that too warm smile again. We'd need to work out some arrangements. Something in his tone made my skin crawl. What kind of arrangements? Nothing unreasonable. Extra shifts, helping with books, keeping me company during late nights. He reached across the desk, his fingers brushing my hand. I could be very generous to the right person. I jerked back, nearly knocking over my chair. I should get back to work. Don't be hasty, Lila. You're in a tough spot. I'm offering help. His voice hardened slightly. Your mother would understand. She made similar choices when she was young. The implications hit me like a slap. What exactly do you know about my mother? Enough to know the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. He stood, moving around the desk. Think about it. The offer stands. For now. I backed toward the door. I quit. You're just like him, Leo called after me as I fled. David never could see an opportunity when it was right in front of him either. I froze. David? But Leo just smiled and turned away, leaving me with another piece of the puzzle I couldn't quite fit. Sighed, I slumped against the building, hands shaking as I pulled out my phone and the crumpled letter from my pocket. 2 mentions of David in 2 days after 18 years of never hearing the name. I googled David Caldwell plus our town name. The first result made my blood run cold. Local teen's disappearance remains unsolved after 20 years. The grainy photo showed a boy around my age, with a familiar smile that hit me like a punch to the gut. My phone buzzed, a text from my mother. The realtor said you haven't chosen an apartment yet. Time is running out. Another buzz. Stay away from Leo Hargrove. I stared at the second message, anger and confusion burning in my throat. Now she wanted to protect me? After arranging to abandon me in the same town where her nephew had vanished? My fingers moved before I could think better of it, typing in Aunt Marge's address from the letter. It was only a 20-minute drive. Going to be late, I texted my parents. Don't wait up. The response came instantly. Do not contact Marjorie. This isn't up for discussion. But I was done with their discussions, done with their secrets and schemes. If they wouldn't tell me the truth about David, about why they were really leaving town, about what Leo knew, then I'd find someone who would. I got in my car and pulled up directions to Aunt Marge's house, the newspaper article about David still open on my phone. Whatever had happened 20 years ago, whatever choice my mother had made, it was all connected to why they were abandoning me now. And I was going to find out exactly what they were running from. Aunt Marge's house looked exactly like the kind of place someone with secrets would live, all overgrown hedges and peeling paint, with wind chimes that rattled like old bones in the evening breeze. I sat in my car for 10 minutes before working up the courage to knock. The door opened before my knuckles could touch it. I wondered when you'd show up. Aunt Marge looked nothing like my mother, where Celeste was all polished edges. Marge was soft curves and faded flannel. You have his eyes. David's. The name slipped out before I could stop it. Something flickered across her face. Come in before the neighbors start talking. God knows they've done enough of that over the years. The inside was cluttered but clean, with mismatched furniture and walls covered in photographs. I stopped at one showing my mother as a teenager, her arm around a smiling boy who could only be David. That was 2 weeks before, Marge said quietly. Before everything changed. What happened to him? She moved to the kitchen, putting on a kettle. Your mother never told you? My mother never tells me anything. I followed her, watching as she pulled out 2 chipped mugs. But Leo Hargrove seems to know all about it. The mug slipped from Marge's hands, shattering on the linoleum. You've spoken to Leo? He offered me a job, and an apartment, and other things. Marge's face went pale. You stayed away from him? I quit. But he said something about my mother making similar choices when she was young. That bastard, Marge whispered, her hand shaking as she cleaned up the broken ceramic. After all these years, he's still... My phone buzzed, another text from my mother. Come home immediately. We know where you are. They're going to try to stop me from finding out the truth, aren't they? I showed Marge the message. She straightened up, something hardening in her expression. Your mother's been running from the truth for 20 years. But maybe it's time someone finally told it. Before she could continue, headlights swept across the windows. Car door slammed. Marjorie! My mother's voice, sharp as broken glass. Open this door. Marge grabbed my arm. Back door. Go to the garage. There's a box on the top shelf marked David's things. Take it. Read everything. Then you'll understand why they're leaving and why they want you gone too. Marge, please. Go. I'll hold them off. But Lila. Her eyes met mine. Whatever you read, remember, your mother wasn't the only one who made choices that night. We all did. Even David. I slipped out just as the front door burst open. Through the kitchen window, I saw my parents enter, my father looking uncomfortable, my mother radiating cold fury. Where is she? Celeste demanded. Hello, sister. 20 years since you've crossed my threshold, and that's how you greet me. I crept into the garage, finding the box exactly where Marge said it would be. Inside was a stack of newspapers, letters, and a leather-bound journal. The first headline made my blood freeze. Local teen missing after confrontation at Moonlight Cafe. Beneath it was a photo of Leo Hargrove, 20 years younger, being questioned by police. And there, in the background, barely visible, my mother, being led away in tears. A noise from the house made me jump. I shoved everything back in the box and slipped out the side door just as I heard my mother's voice rise. You have no right to tell her anything about that night. She has every right to know why her cousin disappeared, Marge shot back. And why you've been protecting his killer all these years. I nearly dropped the box. Killer? My mother had protected David's killer? As if sensing my thoughts, my phone lit up with one final message from my mother. Whatever you think you know, you don't understand. Come home now or there will be consequences. But standing there in the dark, clutching a box full of 20-year-old secrets, I realized I was done letting them threaten me with consequences. It was time they faced some of their own. I spent the night in Tessa's garage, surrounded by David's box of secrets. The newspapers painted a familiar story. Teenage boy vanishes after late-night argument at local cafe. But David's journal told a different tale, one that made my hands shake as I read. Leo knows about Mom and Uncle Jack, the last entry read. Says he'll tell everyone if I don't keep quiet. But Celeste says she has a plan. My mother had a plan. And hours later, David disappeared. Dawn was breaking when Tessa found me, still reading. Your mom's been calling everyone, she said, sitting beside me. She even called my parents at midnight. Did you know about any of this? I showed her the newspaper clipping about David. Mom and Dad never talk about it. But sometimes when your mom comes up in conversation, they get this look. She trailed off, reading over my shoulder. Wait, Uncle Jack? As in your dad's brother. The one who died in that car accident the year before I was born. I pulled out another letter, this one from David to my mother. Except according to this, he didn't die in an accident. He killed himself after Leo threatened to expose their affair. My phone buzzed. Aunt Marge, your mother's looking for you. Be careful. Leo's helping her search. Why would she team up with Leo? Tessa asked. If he's the one who... Because they're both protecting something bigger than David's disappearance. I held up the journal. The last few entries, David was investigating money moving through the cafe. Large deposits, always after Uncle Jack's dental practice made withdrawals. Money laundering? Through Dad's practice too after Uncle Jack died. David figured it out, threatened to expose everything. I closed the journal, feeling sick. No wonder they're running to Switzerland. And leaving me behind as a distraction. Tessa grabbed my arm. Lila, look. Through the garage window, we could see Leo's car crawling past, scanning the street. My phone lit up again, my mother. Whatever David told you in those journals, he was confused. Come home. We can explain everything. How does she know about the journals? Tessa whispered. Because Aunt Marge must have told her what she gave me. I started shoving everything back in the box. Which means... A knock at the garage door made us both jump. Lila. Aunt Marge's voice. I know you're in there. Please, we need to talk. I opened the door cautiously. Marge looked exhausted, her eyes red. I had to tell them what I gave you. They have leverage. You mean they threatened you? I said flatly. Like they threatened David? It's complicated. What happened that night? Was my mother involved in David's disappearance? Marge flinched. She was trying to protect him. We all were. But Leo, he had other plans. And now you're all protecting Leo? After what he did. We're protecting you. Marge's voice cracked. Why do you think your mother is leaving you behind? As long as you're here, safe and ignorant, Leo won't. Car door slammed outside. My mother's voice carried through the garage. Marjorie? Is she in there? Marge grabbed my shoulders. Whatever you do, don't confront Leo. He's been watching you since you turned 18. Just like he watched David. Why? What does he want? The same thing he wanted then, someone young and desperate enough to be controlled. To keep the operation running while your parents established the European connection. Another car pulled up Leo's distinctive engine. Marge pressed something into my hand, a key. Storage Unit 23, Cross Creek Facility. Everything David collected is there. The proof he never got to show the police. She pushed me toward the back door. Run. And Lila? I'm sorry. For all of it. As I slipped out into the morning light, I heard Leo's voice. Found her car around the corner. She can't have gone far. They were wrong about one thing. I wasn't running from the truth anymore. I was running toward it, straight to the evidence that would bring down everyone who'd had a hand in destroying David's life. And maybe, finally, give him the justice he deserved. The storage unit door groaned open, revealing stacks of boxes and a musty darkness that made my skin crawl. I'd barely switched on my phone's flashlight when I heard footsteps behind me. I knew you'd come here. My mother's voice, tired and hollow. Just like David did. I spun around. She stood in the doorway, looking smaller somehow, her perfect posture crumbling at the edges. How did you? Marge texted me. She's trying to protect you, even if you can't see it. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. We all were. By covering up his murder? Murder. She laughed, a broken sound. Is that what you think happened? The journal entries, the money laundering, Leo's threats. Leo didn't kill David. She moved to a stack of boxes, running her fingers along one marked evidence. David killed himself. Right here in this storage unit. After I convinced him to help us trap Leo. The flashlight beam trembled. What? We thought we were so clever. David would pretend to join Leo's operation, gather evidence, wear a wire. Her voice cracked. But Leo knew. He always knew. He showed David photos of me, of Jack, of all the evidence he had against our family. Said if David went to the police, we'd all go down. So David just gave up. He left a note, saying he couldn't live with either choice, destroying his family or letting Leo win. She pulled something from her pocket, a folded piece of paper, worn at the creases. I found him here. Too late. I grabbed the note, my hands shaking as I read David's last words. "I'm sorry, Aunt Celeste. I tried to be strong enough. Take care of Mom." "That's why you're so cold," I whispered. "Why you never. I got your cousin killed by trying to fix things. By thinking I could outsmart someone like Leo." She met my eyes. "When I saw you getting closer to him at the cafe, watching him draw you in like he did David." A metallic click cut her off. The storage unit door. Quite the family reunion. Leo's voice made my blood freeze. "Though you forgot to invite me." He stood in the doorway, backlit by the hallway fluorescence. Something glinted in his hand. "You're not taking her too." My mother stepped between us. "Actually, Celeste, I think it's time Lila learned the whole truth. About David, about Jack." He smiled. "About what really happened to all that money." "Mom." My voice sounded small, even to me. "What's he talking about?" "Tell her, Celeste. Tell her who really suggested using David as bait. Who knew he was unstable, knew he might crack under pressure." "That's not," my mother started. "Tell her who kept the operation running after David died. Who used her own guilt to build our little empire." He stepped closer. "Tell her why you're really running to Switzerland." My mother's shoulders sagged. "I had to protect what was left of my family. By working with him." The betrayal burned in my throat. After what he did to David, I did what I had to do. And now? She turned to Leo. "Now we're done. The evidence, the accounts, everything David collected, it's all here. Take it. Leave Lila out of this." Leo's laugh echoed off the metal walls. "Oh, Felicite. You still think you're in control?" He raised the gun. "But we both know how this ends. Just like it did with David." The storage unit plunged into darkness as my flashlight died. A shot rang out. Someone screamed, maybe me. When the emergency lights flickered on, my mother lay crumpled against the boxes, red spreading across her designer blouse. Leo was gone, along with the box-marked evidence. "Mom." I pressed my hands against the wound, feeling her blood seep through my fingers. "Stay with me. Please." Her eyes focused on something behind me. "Run," she whispered. Footsteps approached. "Like mother, like daughter," Leo's voice came from the doorway. "Always trying to fix things that should stay broken." I turned, seeing the gun aimed at my head, and realized with startling clarity that I finally understood how David felt in his final moments. Sometimes there are no good choices left. The fluorescent lights flickered as Leo's finger tightened on the trigger. My mother's blood was still warm on my hands, and somewhere in the distance, sirens wailed. "You won't shoot me," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. "You need me." Leo's smile didn't reach his eyes. "And why's that?" "Because I'm the only one who knows about the second set of books." The words tumbled out before I could second-guess them. The ones David actually hid. His gun hand wavered slightly. Behind me, I heard my mother's labored breathing. "You're bluffing," Leo said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "David never had time to tell you about them?" "Course not. You scared him into suicide before he could." I stood slowly, positioning myself between Leo and my mother. "But he told someone else. Someone you never suspected." A door slammed somewhere in the storage facility. Leo's head jerked toward the sound. "You really think David would trust his aunt?" I pressed. "The sister of the woman having an affair with his uncle?" "No. He trusted someone his own age. Someone who could wait years to use the information." "Tessa," Leo breathed. "That's why you two were always at the cafe." I forced a laugh. "All those years, watching you, learning your operation. Did you really think I applied for that job by accident?" The sirens were closer now. Leo's face twisted with rage and doubt. "You're lying," he snarled, but his eyes darted to the door again. "Maybe. But can you risk it? Police are coming." If those books surface, I took a step forward. How many people did you really kill, Leo? David wasn't the first, was he? Shut up. The gun shook in his hand. Or was it all just manipulation? Making people think death was their only escape? Another step. Like you tried with me? I said shut. The storage unit door burst open. Aunt Marge stood there, holding something that made Leo's face go white. Looking for this? She held up a USB drive. David gave it to me the night he died. Said if anything happened to him, I should keep it safe until Lila was old enough. That's impossible, Leo whispered. You weren't even in town that night? Marge's laugh was bitter. I was. Celeste called me worried about David. I got here too late to save him, but not too late to find what he left behind. Leo swung the gun toward Marge. I lunged, grabbing his arm. The shot went wide, sparking off metal walls. We grappled for the weapon as Marge shouted something I couldn't hear over the blood pounding in my ears. His finger found the trigger again. I twisted, remembering a self-defense move Tessa's dad had taught us years ago. The gun went off. Leo staggered back, a look of surprise crossing his face as red bloomed across his chest. He fell, the gun clattering away. Lila, my mother's voice, weak but urgent. The box? Under the tarps? I scrambled to where she pointed. Under dusty tarps lay a metal box, its lid covered in familiar handwriting David's. He knew, my mother whispered as I opened it. Knew what would happen. Left everything we'd need. Inside were files, photos, USB drives, 2 decades of evidence against not just Leo but everyone involved in his operation. And on top, a letter addressed to me. Dear Lila, it began. If you're reading this, it means you're facing the same choice I did. But you're stronger than I was. You'll make the right decision. The storage unit filled with police and paramedics. As they loaded my mother onto a stretcher, she grabbed my hand. I'm sorry, she said. For everything. For not being strong enough to end this years ago. I squeezed her hand, watching Leo's still form being covered with a sheet. It's ended now. Aunt Marge wrapped an arm around me as the paramedics wheeled my mother away. David would be proud, she said softly. You finished what he started. I looked down at the letter in my hands, thinking of choices and consequences, of strength and weakness, of the thin line between justice and revenge. No, I said. We all did. 6 months later, I stood in front of the renovated Moonlight Cafe, now transformed into a community center. The grand opening banner fluttered in the spring breeze, and Aunt Marge squeezed my hand as we watched families stream inside. David would have loved this, she said softly. My mother approached slowly, still walking with a slight limp. Her designer clothes were gone, replaced by simple jeans and a sweater. The art therapy program starts next week, she said. We already have 10 teens signed up. The irony wasn't lost on any of us, turning Leo's hub of manipulation into a safe haven for vulnerable youth. Sometimes the best revenge is healing what your enemy tried to destroy. Dad called again, I told them, watching their reactions carefully. Wants to explain his side of things. What are you going to do? My mother asked, her voice careful, neutral. I pulled an envelope from my bag, the last piece of David's legacy found buried in one of his boxes. I think I'll send him this instead. Inside was a photo of my father with Leo, dated years before I was born, both men smiling over signed documents. On the back, David had written, "The beginning of everything. Remember who chose this path." Are you sure? Marge asked. Some doors are hard to close once they're opened. Some doors shouldn't stay closed, I replied, thinking of all the secrets that had poisoned our family. Besides, he deserves to know why I'm choosing to stay here. My mother flinched slightly at that, but didn't argue. We'd spent months rebuilding our relationship, learning to talk without hiding behind perfect facades and practiced lies. It wasn't always pretty, but it was real. Tessa emerged from the center, grinning. You guys have to see this. The kids are already filling up the suggestion box. Someone even asked if we could start a creative writing program. For processing trauma through storytelling, my mother mused. That's actually brilliant. Speaking of storytelling, Marge pulled something from her purse, a worn journal with David's name on the cover. I think it's time for this to have a new home. I stared at it. But that's the journal that started everything? Yes. She pressed it into my hands. But look at the blank pages in the back. They're waiting for a new story. Your story. As if on cue, a group of teenagers walked past, laughing and pushing each other playfully. They reminded me of David's photo, of how young and full of hope he'd been before everything went wrong. Maybe some stories don't need endings, I said, running my fingers over the journal's worn cover. Maybe they just need new beginnings. My mother touched my shoulder, a gesture that once would have felt foreign but now carried the weight of everything we'd survived together. New beginnings require letting go of old endings. I nodded, thinking of the letter I'd written to my father, still unsent. I forgive you, but I don't need you. I found my family in the truth, not in comfortable lies. Inside the center, someone started playing piano halting, beautiful notes floating through the open doors. Life finding its way through the cracks of what was broken. Ready, Tessa called from the entrance. The writing workshop's about to start. I looked at these women, my aunt who kept faith, my friend who kept secrets, my mother who kept trying, and felt something settle in my chest. Not peace exactly, but purpose. Actually, I said, I think I'm ready to tell my own story. As we walked inside together, I caught a glimpse of our reflection in the window, 4 women, all carrying different pieces of the same broken history but moving forward anyway. Behind us, David's journal waited in my bag, its blank pages promising something I'd never understood until now. Sometimes the best revenge isn't about making others pay for the past. Sometimes it's about refusing to let that past define your future. And sometimes, if you're lucky, you find the family you need in the aftermath of losing the one you thought you wanted.
I moved in with my daughter Diana to start a fresh chapter of my life after my divorce from Albert was confirmed. After this changeover for around 8 months, something unexpected happened. I was having some downtime with Diana at home on one of my days off when I got a strange call from my mom. She told me that without warning, Albert and his mother had come up at my parents' house. I hastily got dressed and rushed over to my parents' house, feeling both curious and alarmed. I arrived to find Albert and his mother sitting on the living room sofa, seemingly anticipating my arrival. I questioned, perplexed by their presence. "Why are you here in my parents' house?" Albert surprised me with his response. "I want you to return the money you owe me," he commanded. "Please allow me to introduce myself. I'm Judy, a 38-year-old employee in an office." After 10 years of marriage, Albert and I had a daughter named Diana, who is currently enrolled in the 8th grade. His kind, gregarious, and upbeat personality drew us in right away on our blind date. We went from being high school sweethearts to life partners, and after a year of dating, he proposed. My close-knit circle of high school pals attended our happy wedding. We were all intricately entwined in one another's life, commemorating significant occasions in tandem. Eventually, every friend in this close-knit group found a spouse and tied the knot, forming a close-knit group of married people. Our family was joyful, and I always thought that our house would be a haven of love and support. Our close-knit circle of friends changed from carefree singles to married adults as we grew older. I declared my pregnancy shortly after, and it appeared that my pals did the same. We quickly became a group of mothers who shared the pleasures and difficulties of becoming parents with one another. We seemed to be riding the waves of life together, and I had no doubt that our friendship would endure forever. I cherished my dual roles as both a wife and a mother, and I was equally passionate about my career. After graduating from college, I secured a position in the planning and development department of a large corporation. My days were packed, and the work was demanding yet fulfilling. Each day brought new lessons and challenges. One of my friends, a stay-at-home mom, once playfully teased me, saying, "You're a workaholic, Judy, but you also manage to maintain a wonderful family life. It's almost as if you're living two lives." She admired my strength, though I often joked that I wished I had the boundless energy typical of a robust man. Both Albert and Diana play pivotal roles in helping me decompress after long days at the office. When I arrived home, I was greeted by Diana's bright, "Oh, Mommy, welcome home." Her youthful enthusiasm and warm hugs melted away the day's fatigue. Albert had transitioned to part-time work at a local cafe after Diana was born, allowing him to take on the primary responsibilities of picking her up from school and preparing dinner. This arrangement not only supported my career, but also ensured that I returned home to a freshly cooked meal, which was a tremendous relief. Albert's thoughtful cooking allowed me to unwind and feel rejuvenated. Evenings at home were a cherished ritual. Diana and I would often take baths together, chatting about our days and sharing little stories. This simple, everyday interaction was a source of immense joy and fulfillment. My life was a beautiful balance of professional achievements and home life bliss, all made possible by the unwavering support and kindness of Albert and Diana. Their support not only bolstered my energy, but also deepened my dedication and passion for my work. Together, we had crafted a life that was as rewarding as it was busy, proving that with the right support, one could indeed have it all. As my career progressed and I began to achieve significant results, I was rewarded with a promotion. With this new position came increased responsibilities, leading me to work more overtime and often arrive home quite late. By this time, Diana had grown older and had a better grasp of the demands of my job, which allowed her to manage more on her own. Meanwhile, Albert also increased his hours at the cafe, further immersing himself in the world of coffee. Lately, I have taken to exploring various coffee shops, indulging in their unique coffee beans. Even today, I have brought home some beans along with cakes from a new bakery I discovered. I suggested we enjoy them together with coffee, excited to share this with Albert, who had become quite passionate about roasting and experimenting with different types of beans at his job. This made the coffee he brewed at home exceptionally good. Albert and Diana were both very supportive of my dedication to my career. But despite their understanding, I started to notice a gradual distancing within our family. The first sign that something was amiss came when Diana approached me with a concern. "What's up? You wanted to talk about something?" I asked her. "The other day when I went to see a movie with friends, I saw Dad with another woman," she revealed, her voice tinged with uncertainty. I was taken aback, shocked by her words. Diana continued, "They weren't holding hands or anything, but they seemed quite close. Lately, I've noticed Dad talking a lot on the phone before you get home. Sometimes he's so engrossed that he doesn't listen to me. He looks happy while he's on the phone. At first, I thought he was texting or talking to you. But after seeing him with that woman, I'm starting to wonder if he was talking to her instead." As she spoke, Diana's expression was filled with sadness. Being in middle school, she was acutely aware and sensitive to such matters, and it was clear she felt troubled by this observation. I was equally stunned. The thought that Albert, who I believed always prioritized Diana, might be involved with someone else was heartbreaking. This revelation required a careful and sensitive approach, as our family's unity was at stake. "I'm so sorry, sweetie. I didn't realize we were making you feel this way. I've been too focused on work, haven't I?" I said, feeling a twinge of guilt as I looked at Diana. "No, it's okay that you work hard, Mom. Don't feel bad about that," Diana reassured me, her maturity at that moment beyond her years. I was touched by her understanding and compassion. "Thank you, Diana," I replied, my heart heavy. "I'll talk to your dad about this. If it turns out he's having an affair, I think I'll have to consider a divorce. Is that okay with you?" She nodded solemnly. I don't like the idea of Dad having an affair. Just knowing that and still being with him would make me feel bad. Seeing Diana so distressed made me realize just how much I had overlooked our family's needs. Determined to address this head-on, especially since Diana had bravely brought it up, I decided to hire a private investigator to delve into Albert's activities. The findings were as shocking as they were conclusive. Albert was indeed having an affair, just as Diana suspected, and there was photographic evidence to prove it. What stunned me most was the identity of his affair partner. Tiffany, one of my high school classmates, and a fellow member of our mom's group. I was more hurt by this betrayal from a trusted friend than by Albert's infidelity. Tiffany, a stay-at-home mom and supposedly a loyal friend in our group, had her young child, yet she was involved with Albert, neglecting her family commitments. Upon seeing the evidence, I was overwhelmed with emotion. Alone in my room, I was grateful that Diana hadn't walked in on me during this moment. The photos would have only added to her distress. I wasn't ready to confront Albert yet, nor could I let Diana see these disturbing images. I took a few deep breaths to compose myself. Shortly after, another friend from the mom's group mentioned she had changed jobs, which sparked an idea. I suggested we all get together, seeing it as a perfect opportunity to observe Tiffany without revealing that I knew about the affair. The gathering was set for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, I quietly contacted a lawyer and began preparing for a potential divorce, fortifying myself for the challenges ahead. I took a moment to gently inform Diana about what I had uncovered and the inevitable decision that her dad and I would be getting a divorce. Together, we spent our free time searching for a new apartment, trying to find a space that would signify a fresh start for us both. As the day of the planned get-together approached, I felt a mixture of anticipation and dread. When the day finally arrived, I engaged in casual conversation with my friends, starting with asking about one friend's new job before we all shared updates on our lives. Tiffany seemed oblivious to the fact that I knew her secret. During the conversation, she lamented her routine life, saying, "I'm just a housewife stuck in the same routine. Unlike all of you who have careers, you don't have to work because your husband supports you." Another friend pointed out, "I do appreciate my husband." Tiffany replied, "But sometimes I feel a little bored." It was then that I decided it was time to address the elephant in the room. "So is that why you're having an affair with other people's husbands?" I asked, turning directly to Tiffany. The room fell silent, and the casual ambience quickly shifted to tension. "Ah, Judy, what do you mean by that?" Tiffany stammered, her face draining of color. "It seems that Tiffany is having an affair with my husband, Albert," I declared plainly. "What? No way. You must be joking." Another friend interjected, trying to defend Tiffany, taking advantage of the disbelief. Tiffany tried to deflect. "That's right, Judy." "What are you talking about?" "Oliva." "Sudden, you must have confused me with someone else." "Oh, really?" I countered, my voice steady. "Then why don't you all take a look at this?" I reached into my bag, pulled out the photos, and spread them out on the table for everyone to see. The room erupted into gasps of disbelief. "Oh my gosh," they gasped, turning to Tiffany for explanations. Tiffany, clearly caught off guard and unable to deny the evidence before her, covered her mouth with her hand. "I'm sorry," she began, her voice trembling. "I happened to walk into the cafe where your husband works. I didn't know he worked there initially, but then I started going there regularly. My husband provides for me, but he's been neglecting me since we got married. I was feeling lonely, Tiffany continued, tears starting to form in her eyes. Despite her emotional response and attempts to justify her actions, the betrayal cut deep. An affair, particularly with a friend's husband, was a breach of trust that was hard to overlook. Her reasons, while they might explain her actions, didn't excuse them. The revelation was painful but necessary, as it confirmed the reality I had begun to suspect and reshaped the dynamics of our friendship and personal lives. Throughout the confrontation, I maintained my composure, unaffected by Tiffany's tears. "I'm sorry to everyone else here, but Tiffany, I need to let you know that I will be seeking alimony from you," I announced firmly. I had also taken a formal step earlier that day. I sent a certified letter to your mailbox. Today, your husband should have already seen it. Tiffany's face fell as she absorbed the weight of the situation. "Oh no," she murmured, a mix of worry and disbelief in her voice. "How could he do something so terrible?" she asked, still reeling from the shock. "It's far worse to have an affair with a friend's husband, especially when you're married and have a child." I replied, steady and resolute, "You need to face the consequences and make amends for your actions." Visibly shaken, Tiffany nodded her acknowledgement. One of my friends chimed in, "We really can't trust you anymore, Tiffany." With that, we left the restaurant, leaving Tiffany to grapple with the fallout. Once I dealt with Tiffany, it was time to confront Albert. I was fairly certain that Tiffany had already informed him about what had transpired. When I arrived home, Albert was waiting at the door, his expression panicked. "What have you done?" "I just got a call from Tiffany." "Are you making our affair public?" "How could you be so terrible?" "You acted like a good husband, but you were cheating on me." And no, it's not just about exposing Tiff. "How could you do that to her family?" I retorted, "It's ridiculous." I continued, my tone firm, "It seems people who have affairs think alike. You believe that as long as the other person doesn't find out, it's not a big deal. But what you did was wrong, and it all needs to be revealed as part of your punishment. That's why I'm going to divorce you and seek alimony and child support." Faced with clear evidence of the affair, Albert could not deny the truth. He agreed to the divorce, though he was initially hesitant about the financial implications. Once I hired a strong lawyer and made it clear I was prepared to take the case to court if necessary, he finally consented to the financial arrangements. Following the divorce, Albert sold the house we had lived in and moved to a new apartment. I pursued and received alimony from both Albert and Tiffany, totaling $50,000 from each. Additionally, I secured child support from Albert. Once everything was settled, Diana and I began our new life together. Though the ordeal was deeply traumatic for me, the experience, while painful, marked the start of a new chapter where we could seek peace and rebuild our lives. Over time, the emotional wounds from my divorce began to heal. However, about 8 months later, I faced a new challenge. While I was enjoying a relaxed day at home with Diana, my peace was disrupted by an urgent call from my mother. She informed me that my ex-husband Albert and his mother had unexpectedly shown up at my parents' house and had forced their way inside without permission. My father was not home at the time, so my concerned mother quickly rang me up. I hurriedly prepared myself and went over to my parents' house. Upon arriving, I found Albert and his mother sitting nonchalantly on the living room sofa as if they belonged there. Confused and a bit alarmed, I asked, "What are you both doing here at my parents' house?" All of a sudden, Albert's response was shocking. He demanded, "I want you to give me back the money you owe me." "Huh, I never borrowed any money from you. I replied, perplexed. He retorted, I paid $225,000 for our wedding. Remember, you were in charge of the wedding, so that money was lent to you. Now that we're divorced, you're claiming it was all a fraud. Honestly, I could sue you for marriage fraud, but for now, all I want is that $25,000 back as a settlement. This unreasonable request took me aback. His mother also chimed in, insisting that I pay him as soon as possible. It became clear that Albert was struggling financially, which might have been driving his irrational demands. He had taken a full-time job at the cafe where he used to work part-time, but the pay was modest. Firmly, I reminded him, we both were equally involved in the wedding, and I paid more of our living expenses than you did. The $25,000 is just a small part of what I contributed. Don't bother me with such unreasonable demands. As the tension escalated, they refused to leave. Just then, my father arrived, having been alerted by my mother. What are you guys doing here? He demanded sternly. Albert repeated his claims to my father, who, although usually calm, was visibly furious and shocked by Albert's audacious demands. It's your fault for having an affair in the first place. If you're going to make such outrageous demands, get out of here, my father asserted, trying to expel them from the house. In a desperate turn, Albert fell to his knees and begged, Please, Judy, lend me money. Not only are you demanding alimony, but Tiffany's husband is also after me and I can't afford it. Even $6,000 would help. It was disheartening to see him in such a state begging for money. However, I responded firmly, No, I can't do that. Go home. The situation highlighted the deep desperation Albert was experiencing, but also reaffirmed my resolve to maintain boundaries and protect my family's peace. As the situation with my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law escalated, my father intervened, suggesting he'd handle it. Fine, I'll get the money. Just wait here, he said calmly and walked to another room. Curious, I followed him. With a mischievous grin, he said, Well, I have plenty of money. Since we have it, why not give it to them? He opened the closet and pulled out some cash, creating a sense of suspense. I wondered how this would play out, mused silently. My father then put the bills into an envelope and handed it to Albert. With faces lit up with satisfaction, my ex-husband and ex-mother-in-law left with the envelope, thinking their plan had worked. As soon as they stepped out, I locked the door behind them and made a quick call to the police. It didn't take long for Albert and his mother to realize the money was fake. They rushed back, pounding on our door in anger. Hey, what's going on? This is monopoly money. I don't want this fake cash. Albert shouted, his voice thick with fury. I couldn't help but laugh as I responded through the door. Since we have so much of it, I thought I'd share it with you. Albert's frustration peaked, and he began banging even harder, now kicking the door with his feet. Their actions only escalated the situation further. As Albert and his mother wreaked havoc on our door, the police arrived and caught them in the act. The scene drew the attention of the neighbors, many of whom witnessed their arrest. In the end, not only did Albert not get any money, but he was also fined for the disturbance and had to cover the damage to our front door. Ironically, one of the bystanders was a regular at the cafe where Albert worked, and word of his antics spread quickly. As a result, Albert lost his job and found himself struggling to find new work. He had to move back in with his parents, and his in-laws ended up covering his alimony and child support payments. To safeguard my family further, I filed a restraining order against my former in-laws, ensuring that any future incidents would lead to an immediate police response. Now life is more peaceful and fulfilling. I'm devoted to working hard and relishing the time watching my daughter Diana grow up. My name is Lily, and I'm 31. 9 years my senior Larry, and I recently tied the knot. But shall we take a brief diversion first? I'd like to tell you about the day I met Larry. It was at one of our parents' elegant garden parties that they used to throw. Larry, the new emerging star at his father's company, was 29 years old, and I was 20 years old, fresh out of high school. I recall him approaching me while holding a glass of champagne. He said, his voice as silky as silk, "Lily, right. I've heard a lot about you." I blushed, not knowing quite what to say. "Are you Larry as well?" I answered, "I've heard a lot about you too." My heart skipped a beat as I heard him laugh. "Hopefully everything goes well," he remarked. We laughed, spoke, and, to my surprise, connected in a way I hadn't anticipated for the remainder of the evening. Our parents began discussing our marriage when they saw us together that evening. After several more years, their plan eventually came to pass. We both signed a prenuptial agreement before we were married. It was simple. Either of us could dissolve the union and pocket the $7 million if the other cheated. I signed it without thinking because I didn't want to cheat. I recall that day when we signed that contract. My father, a quiet man with a large heart, gave me a worried look. His voice was firm but slightly worried as he questioned, "Are you sure you're okay with this, Lily?" I comforted him, "Dad, it's fine," and gave him a brief hug. Both Larry and I are trustworthy. It's merely a formality. It was Larry who insisted on signing the document, and Larry was present as well. He uttered, "I don't want you to feel pressured, Lily," in a somewhat strained voice. "If you're not comfortable with this, we can talk about it more." However, I simply gave him a smile and shook my head. "I'm okay with it, Larry. I have faith in you." He smiled warmly at me, clearly relieved. He answered, "And I trust you, Lily." That marked the start of our joint journey. Everyone spoke about the lavish ceremony we had for our marriage. I had no idea that a storm was approaching, but I was eager to begin this new chapter in my life. We relocated to a lovely home outside of the city after the wedding. Living with Larry and waking up beside him every morning was like living out a fantasy. For a time, everything appeared ideal with him. He was kind and considerate. Our fairy tale-like honeymoon was unforgettable. We basked in the sun and one another's companionship for 3 weeks at an exquisite beach resort. But things started to change after we got home. Larry changed, becoming a man immersed in contemplation all the time. He began arriving home from work later than usual, and he would go straight to bed without saying good night. We started eating at various times, sleeping in different rooms, and hardly speaking to one another. I chose to face him one day. "Larry," I responded, attempting to maintain my composure. "What's the deal? Since we returned from our vacation, you have been behaving strangely." His eyes were no longer as warm as they used to be when he gazed at me. He avoided making eye contact and said, "I've just been busy with work, Lily." "But we don't really talk anymore," I said. "We're living like strangers in our own home." With a groan, he combed through his hair. "Lie, I am aware. I apologize. I'll do my best to schedule additional time for us." However, nothing altered. Actually, things grew worse. Even later, often even until the wee hours of the morning, Larry began to return home. We hardly saw each other anymore after he stopped eating with me. I began to have doubts. Was he seeing someone else? The thought made me feel sick, but I couldn't ignore the signs. I decided to confront him again. "Larry," I said one night when he came home late, "are you seeing someone else?" He looked shocked by my question. "What? No, Lily. I would never do that to you." "Then why are you always out? You never spend time with me," I said, tears filling my eyes. "I told you, it's just work," he said firmly. "I'm not cheating on you" lie. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Larry was not the same man I had married. He was distant, cold, and seemed to be hiding something. I didn't know what to do. I love Larry, but I couldn't keep living like this. I decided to start investigating. If Larry wasn't going to tell me what was happening, I needed to find out for myself. I began by checking his phone when he was in the shower. I felt guilty for invading his privacy, but I was desperate for answers. I didn't find any suspicious messages or calls, but I did find something that made my heart sink. Larry had been searching for apartments. Was he planning to leave me? I confronted him about it. "Larry, why are you looking for apartments? Are you planning on leaving me?" He looked shocked. "No, Lily, I was just looking. I wasn't planning on leaving you." "Then why were you looking?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I don't know, Lily," he said, barely whispering. "I just need some space." One day, I decided to talk to my mom about it. She's always been my support, the person I turn to when things get tough. "Mom," I said, "I don't know what to do. Larry has changed. He's not the same person anymore." My mom listened, concern written all over her face. "Lily," she said, "you're both still adjusting. You're newlyweds. It takes time to build a life together." I wanted to believe her, to think that this was just a phase, and that things would get better. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. Larry was hiding something. I could feel it. I tried to push the feeling away, tried to convince myself that Mom was right. But the nagging voice in the back of my mind wouldn't go away, constantly reminding me that something was off. 3 weeks later, I gathered my courage and approached Larry. "I need a job," I said, looking him in the eye. He seemed surprised. "You want to work?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded. "Yes, I need to do something, Larry. I can't just sit at home all day." He thought for a moment, then said, "I can offer you a job at my foundation. We help kids in tough situations. Would you be interested?" I was surprised. Larry's foundation was well known for its work with children, and I had always admired what they did. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I'd love to." Working at the foundation was a breath of fresh air. I was busy in doing something meaningful. I met kids who were strong and resilient, kids who had gone through more hardships than any child should. It was heartbreaking, but also inspiring. The job kept me busy and helped me take my mind off the problems at home. Larry and I were struggling, but at least during the day, I had something else to focus on. The work was tough and emotionally draining, but it was worth it. I felt like I was making a difference, like I was doing something important. For the first time in a long while, I felt happy. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Larry was acting strange and distant. I couldn't figure out what it was, but I knew something was off. I was determined to find out. With a heavy heart full of questions and doubts, I decided to hire a private detective. I needed to know if Larry was cheating on me. It wasn't just about my pride, it was about my peace of mind. I couldn't live with constant uncertainty, always wondering what had gone wrong. There was also the prenup we signed before getting married. If Larry was cheating, it wouldn't just be a betrayal. It would be a costly mistake. I found a detective agency in the city run by a man named Tyler. He was an ex-cop, a seasoned veteran with a sharp eye and a no-nonsense attitude. I told him my story and my suspicions. He listened, his face expressionless. "I'll do my best, Lily," he said when I finished. "But I can't promise anything. If your husband is cheating, he's doing a good job of hiding it." I nodded, understanding. "I just need to know, Tyler. One way or another, I need to know." I remember the day he came back to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes filled with sympathy. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said. "I couldn't find any evidence that your husband is cheating on you." I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment. Part of me was glad that Larry wasn't cheating, but another part of me was frustrated. If he wasn't cheating, then why did he leave? What was he hiding? "Are you sure, Tyler?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "There's nothing at all." Tyler shook his head. "I'm sorry, Lily. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." I thanked Tyler and paid him for his services. As I watched him leave, I felt a deep sense of loss. I was back where I started, with more questions than answers. One day, while I was working at a charity event, a new guy walked in. His name was John. He was handsome, with a smile that could light up the room. He was smart, with a quick wit and a sharp mind. He was funny, with a sense of humor that made everyone laugh. He looked like a famous actor, with his chiseled features and striking good looks. In short, he was my ideal man. But despite being drawn to John, I couldn't shake off a feeling of unease. His arrival seemed too perfect, too convenient. I couldn't help but think about Larry and our prenup. If I was caught cheating, I'd have to pay a huge sum of $7 million. Could John be a trap set by Larry to catch me? I decided to hire Tyler, the private detective I had used before. I asked him to investigate John and see if he had any connections to Larry. Tyler agreed to take the case and started digging into John's past and connections. He followed him, watched his movements and interactions. Tyler was thorough, leaving no stone unturned. In the meantime, I tried to keep my distance from John. It was hard, especially since he was so charming and attractive. But I had to be careful. I couldn't afford to fall into a trap, not when so much was at stake. One day, John asked me out for coffee. I was torn. Part of me wanted to say yes to get to know him better, but another part of me was scared, worried about what Tyler might find. "I'd love to, John," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "But I'm really busy right now. Maybe some other time." John seemed disappointed, but didn't push. "Sure, Lily," he said, his smile fading a bit. "Some other time." I felt a pang of guilt. What if I was wrong? What if John was just a nice guy, and I was letting my suspicions ruin something good? But I couldn't take the risk, not until I knew for sure. 5 days later, Tyler came to give me his report. His face was serious, his eyes hard. "I'm sorry, Lily," he said, "but your suspicions were right. John is working for your husband." I felt a rush of emotions. Anger at Larry for trying to trap me, relief that I hadn't fallen for it, and sadness that John wasn't who I thought he was. But above all, I felt a sense of vindication. I wasn't imagining things. My suspicions were real. "Thank you, Tyler," I said, my voice catching with emotion. "You've done a great job." As I watched Tyler leave, I felt a strange sense of closure. I had dodged a bullet and avoided a costly mistake, but I also felt like I had lost something, the idea of the perfect man and the hope of finding love again. It was a hard truth to accept, but I wasn't going to let it bring me down. I was stronger than that. I was determined to move on and find happiness again. I didn't need an ideal man. I just needed someone who was real and honest, and I was going to find that person no matter what. Instead of sending John packing right then, I decided to take a different approach. I chose to play along and befriend him, all while keeping my behavior above board so Larry would have no reason to accuse me of anything. John, however, took my friendliness as a sign of something more. He started to relax, thinking he had me fooled. The irony was that he was the one being played, but I didn't let him in on the secret. I couldn't risk him running back to Larry, so I kept up the act and maintained a friendly facade. One day, I decided to take things up a notch. I asked John to join me for lunch, making it sound like a casual discussion about charity work. He agreed with a smug smile on his face, thinking he was making progress. We found a quiet spot in the cafe. "So, John," I began, "how are you finding the charity work?" He shrugged, a confident look in his eyes. "It's good. Different, but good." "And Larry?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "What do you think of him?" John looked surprised. "Larry? He's okay, I guess. Why?" I shrugged, trying to appear casual. "Just curious. He's a bit of a mystery, isn't he?" John laughed, clearly relieved. "Yeah, he can be hard to figure out." We continued chatting about work and life, and I made sure to keep my tone neutral, not giving him any reason to be suspicious. In the days that followed, I continued to play along, keeping up the friendly act but never crossing the line. It was a risky game, but one I was willing to play for now. One day during one of our lunch meetings, John looked at me with a serious expression. "You know, I've been thinking," John said. I raised an eyebrow, feeling a chill run down my spine. "About what?" I asked. He shrugged, looking uncomfortable. "About us. About this thing between us." My heart skipped a beat. This was the moment I had been dreading. I forced a smile. "And what is it that we have, John?" He looked at me with a hopeful expression. "I think we have something special." I felt a pang of guilt. John was falling into my trap just as I had planned, but it didn't feel right. It didn't feel good. Still, I had to keep up the act, had to keep playing the game. So I smiled at John, a fake smile plastered on my face. "Yes, John," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "We do have something special." And just like that, the trap was set. The game was on. But at what cost? The Cold War at home with Larry was as icy as ever. We'd occasionally run into each other, exchange chilly greetings, and then retreat to our separate corners. Most nights he stayed at his apartment, claiming it was more convenient for his work. One Friday afternoon, I called John. I laced my voice with warmth, as fake as his documents, inviting him over to my place. He probably thought I was finally ready to give in to his advances. Poor guy, he couldn't have been more wrong. When John stepped into my home, he was greeted not by a seductive housewife, but by my old classmate, now a stern-faced police officer. The surprise on John's face was worth every bit of it. The officer checked John's papers, and as expected, they were as fake as a $5 bill. Now it was my turn to make a move. I offered John a choice. He could either stick with Larry and face the consequences of his fake documents or switch sides and work for me. John's eyes darted between me and the officer, and after a moment of silence, he nodded. He agreed to my deal. Checkmate, Larry. With that, the real game began. I had Larry's pawn now playing on my side, but I knew this was just the beginning. Larry was a crafty man. He wouldn't go down without a fight. In the days that followed, I kept a close watch on John. Despite his agreement, I knew I couldn't fully trust him. He was a wild card, a potential threat. But for the time being, he was a useful one. One day, I called John to my office. "We need to talk," I said, my tone serious. He looked at me with a hint of unease in his eyes. "About what?" he asked. "About Larry," I replied. "I need to know everything. His plans, his strategies, everything." John hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, I'll tell you everything." I had my insider and my counterattack was ready. But this was just the beginning. The real battle was still ahead. Larry wouldn't go down without a fight, and I had to be prepared. This wasn't just a game anymore. It was war. And in war, there are no rules, only survival. Days turned into weeks, and I was getting anxious. I wanted to confront Larry, to show him I wasn't the pushover he thought I was. Tyler, who I turned to again, gave me some advice. Push Larry, he suggested. Make him think you've fallen into his trap. It was a gamble, but I was ready to play the game. So John and I staged a photo shoot. We posed in ways that could be seen as compromising, like proof of an affair, but we were careful. We kept the original photos where everything was as innocent as a Friday school picnic. Once the photos were ready, I handed them to John. Give these to Larry, I said, passing him the envelope. Let him draw his own conclusions. John looked at me, concern on his face. Are you sure about this? He asked. Once you start this, there's no going back. I know, I replied, my voice firm. And I'm ready. The very next day, Larry was all smiles at dinner. He thought he had caught me, that he had the upper hand, but he didn't say a word about it. I wasn't worried. I knew it was coming and I was ready. Meanwhile, Tyler was on the case, digging up dirt on Larry and finding all the evidence we needed. He was good at his job, and I trusted him. Finally, Tyler called me. Larry's relaxed and has let his guard down, he said, his voice full of satisfaction. I've caught him. I've got all the proof. Photos, videos, everything. I felt a surge of excitement. Good, I said, a smile spreading across my face. Let's bring him down. But I didn't confront Larry, not yet. I wanted him to think he was winning. I wanted to see the look on his face when he realized he'd been played. So I waited, playing the part of the dutiful wife, biding my time until Larry made his move. I knew it was coming, and I was ready. The clock was ticking towards the family dinner. I knew this was the showdown. Strangely, I felt calm. I was ready. The dinner was at Larry's parents' luxury mansion, a huge estate that screamed old money. Larry was there, of course, playing the role of the perfect son and husband. But I knew the truth, and soon everyone else would too. We were halfway through the main course when Larry cleared his throat and stood up, a smug smile on his face. I have something to say, he announced, looking straight at me. He pulled out a set of photos of me with John and tossed them on the table like he was holding a winning hand. Proof, he said, his voice full of triumph, of my wife's infidelity. The room went silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me, but I didn't flinch. I was ready for this. I calmly stood up and met Larry's gaze. Yes, I said, my voice steady. I know this man, but he's not my lover. He's an actor hired by you, Larry, to frame me. I pulled out my phone and pressed play. The room filled with John's voice confessing everything. Larry's smile faded and his eyes widened in shock. But I wasn't done. I pulled out my own set of photos and videos, evidence of Larry's affairs, and tossed them on the table. What about these, Larry? I asked, my voice cold. Can you explain them? Larry stammered, trying to deny it, but the evidence was undeniable. His parents' faces turned to stone. My parents, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke up. You ungrateful brat, my father roared at Larry. We trusted you with our daughter, and this is how you repay us. Larry's mother was in tears. How could you, Larry? She sobbed. How could you do this to us? To her. The aftermath was swift. We divorced. Larry's parents, furious at their son's deceit, fired him from their company. His reputation was in ruins. As for me, I walked away with $7 million in compensation. Now Larry is jobless, scrambling to piece his life back together, while I'm free. I'm enjoying the peace and quiet, the freedom from him. I won. I took on Larry and won. I outsmarted him and played his own game better than he did. And it feels good. It feels right. Our 5-year-old daughter stated, Daddy, the girl in the trunk is asking to be let out, while we were out on a peaceful family drive. My heart skipped a beat when her sweet voice broke the stillness. I looked at my spouse, attempting to gauge his response. His expression paled from when it had been composed moments before. I wasn't sure if he was feigning ignorance or if her statements really scared him. His eyes wild with terror, he cast a quick glimpse through the rearview mirror back at our daughter. He said something along the lines of, "That's a scary thing to say," attempting to ignore it. "You shouldn't tell such lies." From the passenger seat, I glared at him, my chest clenching with mistrust. "Perhaps we ought to stop at the rest area," I said, sounding more caustic than I meant to. 6 years had passed since our marriage. My spouse has always had my support, despite the demanding nature of his work. While he concentrated on his profession, I had been the one keeping everything under control at home. But now that our daughter had said such unusual things, I was filled with a sense of unease. Was the dark side going to come to light? I am Elizabeth. At 30 years old, I tied the knot with James. We've been together for 5 years, and our bond has always appeared strong. Our daughter Julia was born the year after we were married, and she filled our lives with endless happiness. She just turned 5 years old and has been growing up healthy and active. Our family had been enjoying busy, joyful days full of laughter and love. In an attempt to lighten the mood, James said, "How about going to the zoo next Friday?" "Congrats, I am eager to view the giraffes." Juliet gasped with delight, as if she had forgotten her earlier remark. I felt some of the tension melt away as I smiled at their light-hearted banter. James was a loving and caring husband from the beginning. He has been kind and considerate ever since we first started dating, and that continued when Julia was born and we were married. He would excitedly participate in family get-togethers on his days off, playing games and making Julia laugh. He was our devoted and unwavering father. I would often reflect on how fortunate I was to have married him. The sight of James and Julia together filled me with immense joy. We had a happy, secure, and loving life. But little did I know, those peaceful days were about to be shattered. One day, James came home with a heavy sigh, his face looking weary and troubled. "You're being transferred to a different department?" I asked, noticing his downcast expression. "Yeah," he replied, his voice flat. "It's company policy. They want me to gain experience in different places." His words felt like the first crack in our happy life. I didn't know why, but something about this transfer made me uneasy. I could sense that there was more to the story, something James wasn't telling me. And as our daughter's strange words echoed in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives were about to change in ways I couldn't imagine. James was being transferred to the busiest department in his company, which meant he might not be able to spend as much time with us. The news hit our family hard, especially Julia. "Daddy, are you not going to play with me anymore?" she asked, her big eyes filled with worry. James, trying his best to reassure her, gently stroked her hair and said, "I'll do my best to spend as much time with you as possible. Julia, let's go to the zoo again sometime soon." Despite his comforting words, I could see the regret in his expression. He knew this transfer was going to change things for us, and the thought of it weighed heavily on his mind. As I watched him with our daughter, a tightness grew in my chest, overwhelmed with emotions. The transfer didn't involve a change in salary or require us to move, but it was still a big deal for our family. Just the thought of having less time together made me feel incredibly lonely. However, I knew the one feeling the most vulnerable was James. Adjusting to a new, more demanding environment would be tough for him. "Please don't push yourself too hard," I said, trying to hide the worry in my voice. I knew James had a tendency to throw himself fully into his work, sometimes to the point of exhaustion. That's why I worried about him overdoing it. Unfortunately, my concerns turned out to be justified. At first, James managed to balance his work and home life. He still made time for family activities and found moments to rest despite his busier schedule. But about a month after the transfer, everything changed. His time at home decreased dramatically. He started working overtime, often coming home late at night, long after Julia had gone to bed. It became more common for him to go out for drinks with clients, and he even began working on his days off. But there was something else that concerned me even more. One day, I cautiously asked him, "Hey, can you take a day off next Friday? Julia misses you, and you've been working too hard lately." James looked at me with a tired, frustrated expression. "Who you think I'm working so hard for? Should I just turn down client meetings and risk getting fired?" He snapped. I quickly replied, "I didn't mean it like that. I'm just worried about you." "That's none of your business," he muttered, brushing me off. "Anyway, make sure you have money ready for next week's drinking party." His words stung, and I could see how much the stress was affecting him. James, who had always been kind and patient, was now irritable and short-tempered. He started taking out his frustrations on me more frequently, and I found myself walking on eggshells around him. What worried me even more was how he was spending money extravagantly, claiming it was necessary for entertaining clients. This new habit was beginning to impact our living expenses, adding financial stress to an already tough situation. Because I knew how kind he used to be, I was more worried than angry about his current behavior. It was clear to me that the pressure of his new job was getting to him, and I feared he was going to collapse from overwork if things didn't change. I felt helpless, not knowing how to make things better for him or for our family. As the months passed, James's situation only worsened. 5 months after his transfer, he reached a point where he was coming home mostly just to sleep. Our conversations became brief, and the connection we once had felt distant. Julia, feeling the absence of her father, started to show signs of sadness. She often wore a forlorn expression, missing the time they used to spend together. Seeing her like that broke my heart. I knew we couldn't go on like this. I needed to find a way to help James before his relentless work schedule took an even bigger toll on our family. But I didn't know where to start, and the weight of it all was becoming too much to bear. I knew things couldn't go on like this, so I started trying to figure out a way for James to take a break. He was clearly overwhelmed, and our family was suffering because of it. But just as I was beginning to make plans, more bad things started to happen, almost as if the universe was working against us. The worst blow came when my mother, who had been battling an illness for several years, suddenly passed away in the hospital. The moment I heard the news, it felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. "No, Mom," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. My father had died when I was young, so my mother was the only parent I had left. Losing her felt like losing the last piece of my childhood. I couldn't even have a proper conversation with her before she passed away, and that regret weighed heavily on me. When the call came, I was at home, and I was so shocked that I couldn't move for a while. I just stood there, frozen, as the realization hit me that she was really gone. But what hurt even more was James's reaction when I told him about my mother's passing. His response was unbelievably cold. "Hey, do I have to go to that funeral too?" he asked, his voice completely devoid of sympathy. I stared at him, my eyes wide with disbelief. Yes, the relationship between James and my mother might have been distant, but she was still his mother-in-law. She was family. I couldn't understand how he could be so indifferent, especially at a time like this. "What are you saying?" "Of course, you have to go," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's a family funeral. Don't get mad at me." He muttered, rolling his eyes. "Oh, why does this have to happen now?" I had plans too. His words cut through me like a knife. In the past, James would have comforted me, perhaps by rubbing my back and grieving with me together. But now, as he sighed in dissatisfaction, he seemed like a completely different person from the one I had promised to spend my life with. Naturally, he didn't help with any of the preparations for my mother's funeral. I arranged everything alone, feeling more isolated than ever. On the day of the service, James remained silent and sullen. He didn't offer any support or comfort, and after the funeral ended, he simply said, "It's over now, right?" I'm heading home first, and left without helping with the cleanup. I was initially confused by his reaction, but by then, I had lost the energy to be angry. I was simply bewildered and deeply disappointed in him. No matter how busy or stressed he was from work, his behavior at the funeral was unacceptable. When did my husband become such a cold person? Despite feeling frustrated with him, I finished cleaning up with Julia by my side. She was too young to understand everything that was happening, but she could sense that something was wrong and did her best to help me. "Mom, Julia will help you," she said, her small voice bringing a bit of comfort to my aching heart. After the funeral, I decided to stop by my parents' house for a short while. It wasn't far from our home, and I wanted to say a final goodbye to the place that held so many memories of my mother. Although it was a sad visit, I felt it was something I needed to do for my own peace of mind. When I arrived at my parents' house with a heavy heart, I took a deep breath and walked inside. The house felt empty, a shell of what it used to be. As I stood in the living room, surrounded by the remnants of my mother's life, I felt a wave of sorrow wash over me. But before I could even begin to process my feelings, something unexpected happened. "Mom, wait a moment," Julia suddenly shouted, her voice filled with urgency. "Huh? Julia, what's wrong?" I asked, startled by her sudden change in behavior. As soon as we arrived at my parents' house, Julia's expression had shifted dramatically. Without another word, she dashed straight into the back room, leaving me standing there, puzzled and concerned. I quickly followed her, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and confusion, wondering what could have caused her to react like this. I had taken Julia to visit my mother's place several times before, but I had never seen her act like this. Curious and concerned, I hurried to follow her as she moved with a sense of purpose. Julia stopped in front of the dresser, her small hands reaching for the second drawer from the bottom. It was as if something was drawing her to it. "Mom, Grandma wants you to have this," she said, holding up an old hand mirror. The sight of the mirror took my breath away. It was an item that had always been precious to my mother. She cherished it so much that she rarely used it, and I didn't even know where she kept it. I stood there stunned as I realized that Julia had somehow found this hidden treasure. "How did you know it was here? And what do you mean Grandma wanted me to have it?" I asked, my voice tinged with disbelief. "When Grandma was sleeping earlier, she told me that you were sad and asked me to give this to you." Julia answered innocently, her eyes wide with sincerity. I couldn't hide my surprise. Her words sent a chill down my spine. There was no way Julia could have known about the existence of this hand mirror, let alone where it was kept. Yet here she was, holding it out to me with a calm certainty that was both unsettling and awe-inspiring. Wanting to understand what was happening, I decided to ask her some questions. I asked about things she couldn't possibly know, tomorrow's dinner menu, what I was thinking about, and even thoughts I had during the funeral. To my astonishment, Julia answered each question correctly, as if she had read my mind. It became clear to me that my daughter had a mysterious ability to know what people were thinking. I was both amazed and bewildered. "Wow, that's amazing. Julia, you know everything," I said, stroking her head gently. still trying to wrap my mind around this revelation. I had always thought that the idea of mysterious abilities was just something from stories, never imagining that my own daughter might possess such a power. Julia, proud of her newfound ability, put her hand on her hip and gave me a confident look. That's right. Julia knows about Dad, too. What do you mean? I asked, my heart skipping a beat. What she told me next was incredibly unbelievable and unforgivable. Julia revealed things about James that shook me to my core. I listened in stunned silence as she spoke, realizing that the man I had married was not who I thought he was. A few weeks after my mother's funeral, I decided it was time to confront James. On a morning when he was getting ready to leave for work, I casually mentioned, "By the way, I'm visiting my friend with Julia next Friday." James, who had been focused on getting out the door, suddenly stopped in his tracks. He frowned, looking genuinely troubled. "Really? Oh no, I'm off that day." "That's too bad," he said, his voice filled with artificial concern. I could sense the insincerity in his tone. It was clear to me now that he was hiding something. I let out a small knowing smile, careful not to reveal my true feelings. Now that I knew the truth, there was no love left for James inside me. That Friday, I left home with Julia as planned. We spent about an hour away, giving me time to gather my thoughts and prepare for what I needed to do. When we returned home, Julia pointed towards the garage and said, "Dad's over there." I took a deep breath and walked towards the garage, where the shutter was still down. My heart was pounding, but I knew what had to be done. I lightly knocked on the shutter and called out, "James, I know you're in there. Open it." There was a moment of silence, then a hesitant voice replied, "Huh, Elizabeth? I thought you and Julia had plans." "It's canceled," I replied calmly. "If you're going somewhere, we want to come with you." He sounded flustered and hesitant, clearly not expecting this. "Oh, okay," he stammered, reluctant to open the garage shutter. I had a pretty good idea of what was going on inside, but decided to stay quiet and observe. "Julia wants to go for a drive too," I added, hearing the hope in her voice. Unable to resist, James had no choice but to agree. A few minutes later, he reluctantly opened the garage, and we started our drive together. Sitting in the passenger seat, I looked at James as he drove. His profile was tense, and it solidified my final decision. Life with James had been enjoyable and happy, but I knew those days would never come back. "Hey, did you know Julia has a special power?" I finally brought it up as we merged onto the highway. James furrowed his brows, confused by my sudden confession. "Huh? What's that supposed to mean?" "That's a silly joke," he laughed dismissively. "Daddy, the girl in the trunk is asking you to let her out." Julia suddenly raised her voice from the back seat. I watched as James's face turned pale. He glanced at our daughter through the rearview mirror with a frightened expression. "What a scary thing to say." "You shouldn't tell such lies," he said nervously. "But it's true," Julia insisted. "Then should we pull over at the rest area?" I suggested, trying to support Julia's claim. James immediately looked at me, startled. "Huh, we don't need to do that." "It's just a kid's joke," he said, trying to brush it off. "Julia has a mysterious power, you know. Besides, it's hot today, and it could be dangerous if someone's really in there," I added. He must have thought my suggestion made sense. After flinching and stiffening, he reluctantly headed towards the rest area with a contorted expression on his face. Upon arrival, we left Julia in the air-conditioned car and went outside to check the trunk. "I don't think there's anything in there." "Come on, quickly," I urged James, who was hesitating. Realizing he couldn't escape anymore, James nervously opened the trunk, breaking into a cold sweat. In the next moment, a young woman jumped out, her face flushed red from the heat. "I knew you were cheating," I shouted, my suspicions confirmed. The young woman, looking embarrassed and uncomfortable, stood there while James shook his head. "No, it's not like that. She is a colleague from work. We were just working together," he stammered, trying to explain. "Wow, working in the trunk of our car," I retorted sarcastically. "At the new apartment you're doing a job." James' excuses were pathetic and unbelievable. It turned out that while Julia and I were out, James had been cheating with this woman at home. They were about to go for a drive when we returned unexpectedly, so he had no choice but to hide her in the trunk. As the woman was taken away, James seemed unable to grasp the situation fully. He kept trying to come up with more excuses, but I wasn't listening anymore. I knew our marriage was over. The trust and love we once had were gone, replaced by betrayal and lies. I looked at Julia, who was watching everything quietly from the car. I knew I had to be strong for her, to move on and build a new life without James. I laughed at how ridiculous James' lie was, standing my ground as I pulled out a piece of paper from my bag. "What is this?" I asked, showing him the paper. It read, "Let's go on a drive date on Friday." James and the woman, Janice, turned pale when they saw it. It was no surprise. They could see their flirty email exchanges printed right there. Thanks to Julia, I have found out everything on the day of my mother's funeral. At my parents' house, my daughter had told me, "Daddy has been spending a lot of time with Janice lately. I'm sad because Janice is taking Daddy away from me." After witnessing Julia's strange ability to know things, I became suspicious and decided to keep an eye on James. Sure enough, I found undeniable proof of his affair on his phone. I had made up the fake plan to catch him in the act. "It's a shame this drive turned out this way," I said sarcastically. "It's unfair to look through my phone without permission," James protested, his body tense as he reacted to my words. His absurd remark made me burst into laughter. I had thought he was just busy with work, but it turned out he was spending time with Janice, using our money for their dates. Who exactly is being unfair here? I shot back. "By the way, I've been recording everything since we got into the car." Remembering all the wrongs James had done, I pulled out my phone from my pocket. I had secretly pressed the record button to capture everything. The evidence I had wasn't just messages in this video. I also set up hidden cameras in our house and garage. "Janice, I know everything about you too," I said. Under my relentless confrontation, they both turned white as sheets. I was furious with James, but I couldn't forgive Janice either. I had thoroughly investigated my husband and figured out who she was. Janice was a 27-year-old new employee who worked with James in his new department. From the messages, it was clear she knew about me, yet she still went ahead with the affair, making her just as guilty. Sorry, Elizabeth," James whimpered, clearly not expecting to be cornered so perfectly. His pitiful attempt to plead with me only filled me with more disgust. I glared at both of them with all the anger I could muster. "I will forgive either of you. Get ready to pay," I said firmly. Hearing my words and perhaps realizing their fate, both of them collapsed to their knees. After that, I divorced James. The fact that I had recorded everything and gathered all the evidence paid off. They were ordered to pay $500,000 in compensation. I was also able to get $1,000 a month in child support from my husband. But their trouble didn't stop there. I heard that news of their affair spread throughout the whole company, especially since they worked in the same department. This made things very uncomfortable for them, and eventually they broke up. Their coworkers started to disapprove of them, and in the end, they had no choice but to resign. Now I've heard they're struggling with the burden of the compensation payments and are left with nothing. Meanwhile, I'm enjoying peaceful days with Julia. I'm focused on giving her lots of love and support, knowing she has a special gift. I want to make sure she grows up happy and well taken care of. At the age of 10, my life took a difficult turn. My name is Emily. Although my dad had been ill for some time, I didn't fully comprehend his condition until he passed away. He was there one day, and the next there was nothing except an empty place at the dinner table. My mother filled that vacant area really quickly. Jack was taken home by her 2 months later. She must have felt alone and needed someone quickly. Like he owned the home, Jack moved in and made it obvious he didn't want me around. "This is Jack, Emily." Mom introduced us the day he moved in, saying, "This is my daughter, Emily, Jack." Jack gave me a chilly expression, as if he'd rather be somewhere else. I managed to say, feeling awkward but trying to be nice, "Hello." Jack did not even smile. He simply nodded. He looked up at Mom. "Linda, may we discuss the living situation?" His hand on her shoulder as they walked away, I recall feeling a cold. I didn't have to wait long to begin feeling alienated in my own house. Jack was always nagging me and making rules for everything, like don't leave your stuff in the living room. Consume food more quickly. Avoid creating excessive noise. It didn't stop. Mom seemed exhausted or empty-eyed, but she simply followed Jack's instructions. Things boiled over at dinner one evening. A glass of water spilt towards Jack after I unintentionally knocked it over. "Silly child, is there nothing you can do correctly?" As the water splattered over his trousers, Jack lost it and leaped to his feet. "I apologize, Jack. It was an accident. I stumbled as my face began to burn." "Sorry doesn't fix problems." "Emily, please use greater caution," he admonished, speaking louder than was necessary. Mom said nothing as she sat there silently, wiping her lips with a serviette. I turned to face her, thinking she would say anything to defend me, but she said nothing. In their room, I heard them fighting. Jack had a rough, high-pitched voice. "Linda, you need to get that youngster in shape. Just because you're used to turmoil doesn't mean I have to live that way." Mom's response was hushed, but I could understand some of it. "Please, Jack, she's just a kid. She hasn't adjusted yet." Moderating, "It has been months. I am warning you if things don't get better." Not that I needed to hear the rest. The message was clear. Mom wasn't resisting Jack's request for me to move out of the way too much. The next few months were just as hard. Jack's complaints were a daily thing, and Mom's silence grew heavier. I was walking on eggshells, trying not to make a sound, trying to disappear if I could. But you can't disappear in your own home, can you? Even a 10-year-old knows that much. Life at home got more complicated when Mom told us she was expecting. Jack already had a hard time tolerating me, and the news didn't exactly make him happy. He was silent for a long minute before he spoke, and when he did, his words were cold. "Well, that's just great. Linda, just what we needed," he said, his tone dripping with sarcasm. Mom smiled, but it was a weak smile. "It's a blessing, Jack. You'll see. A fresh start for us." I felt a mix of excitement and dread. A little brother or sister seemed like a dream, someone new to connect with. But with Jack's mood swings, I wasn't so sure. The months flew by, and the baby finally arrived. It was a girl, and they named her Lauren. I was thrilled. She was so tiny, and when I first saw her all wrapped up in her pink blanket, my heart melted. I thought having Lauren around might make things better, even make Jack soften up a bit. Holding Lauren felt magical. She was so small, her tiny fingers grasping at nothing. "Hey there, Lauren. I'm your big sister, Emily. I'm going to take good care of you," I whispered, promising silently to be there for her no matter what. But the magic didn't last. Bringing Lauren home changed things again. Jack became fussier than ever, especially about money. One night, about a week after Lauren came home, I overheard him talking to Mom in the kitchen. His voice was harsh, louder than it needed to be. More expenses, Linda, diapers, formula, who knows what else. And what about Emily? She's not even mine, and I'm paying for her too. Mom's voice was a quiet murmur. "Jack, please, she's just a child. We can manage. Things will settle down." It's not just about managing Linda. It's about priorities. We need to think about our family now, our real family. I knew what that meant. I wasn't real family. The sting of those words hit me hard. I slid down the wall by my door, hugging my knees, trying not to cry. The final straw came when Jack sat us down in the living room one evening. His face was serious, and he avoided looking at me. "Linda, we need to think about the future. Emily's getting older, and expenses are piling up. Maybe it's time she went to live with her Aunt Joyce." It felt like a punch in the gut, being sent away just like that. Mom finally spoke, looking at me with sad eyes. "Emily, honey, it might not be so bad. Aunt Joyce has a nice house, and you'll be well taken care of." "But Mom, I don't want to go. I want to stay here with you and Lauren." The room went silent. Jack's next words were cold and final. "It's decided then. I'll call Joyce in the morning." Moving in with Aunt Joyce was like stepping into a different world. Her house was big, clean, and always silent, too silent for comfort. The first day I arrived, she laid down her rules like we were negotiating a peace treaty after a long war. "You'll follow my rules under my roof, Emily. No nonsense, no mess, no back talk," she declared as she led me through the hall to what would be my room. The room was plain, with bare walls and a single bed in the corner. It felt nothing like home. I nodded, too tired and upset to argue. Homework right after school, chores before dinner, and lights out by 8. I won't tolerate any laziness or sloppiness, you hear. Aunt Joyce continued, her voice firm. "Yes, Aunt Joyce," I whispered. "Speak up when you're spoken to." "Let's have no mumbling here," she snapped. I quickly corrected my tone. "Yes, Aunt Joyce, I understand." The days that followed blended into each other, each as strict and unforgiving as the last. Aunt Joyce was tough, tougher than anyone I'd ever known. She had a way of making simple conversations feel like interrogations. Homework was a battlefield, too. If I got a B instead of an A, Aunt Joyce had sharp words for me. "You can do better than this. Your laziness won't fly here," she'd scold, even though I'd spent hours poring over books. The worst part was how she reminded me of my mom's decision to send me away. If I dared to talk back or ask for less criticism, she'd retort sharply. "No wonder your mom sent you here. You need discipline. You obviously weren't getting it." Those words hurt. They always did. They made me feel unwanted, unloved, like I didn't belong anywhere. I was just another problem Mom solved by sending me away. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. I learned to keep my head down, do what I was told, and only speak when necessary. Aunt Joyce had no patience for tears or complaints, and I didn't have the energy left to fight. "It's for your own good," she'd often say after scolding me harshly, as if her sharp words were supposed to make me into someone better. I wasn't sure who that better person was supposed to be. All I knew was that I was getting really good at being alone, at being quiet, and at not being a problem. Because in Aunt Joyce's house, not being a problem was the best thing you could be. Living with Aunt Joyce was suffocating, and I found myself missing my mom more each day, even though I knew she'd let me go without much of a fight. One afternoon, the feeling of missing her got too strong to ignore. Aunt Joyce was out, probably at her bridge club, and I knew I had at least a couple of hours before she'd be back. Her phone was always left on the kitchen counter, charging next to the fruit bowl. It seemed like my only link back to my old life. I hesitated for a minute before I picked it up, dialing my mom's number. It was like muscle memory. I hadn't forgotten it, and maybe I never would. My heart raced as I heard the phone ring once, twice. Then I heard her voice. "Hello, Mom, it's me, Emily." There was a pause, a breath, maybe. Then, "Emily, why are you calling?" I swallowed hard, my throat tight. "I just wanted to hear your voice." Another pause, longer this time. Then she spoke, cold and hard. "You shouldn't have called." "But, Mom." "Emily, listen to me. You need to stop this. I can't have you calling me." "But why?" "I miss you, Mom. I miss home. When can I come back?" Her voice was flat, emotionless, like she was discussing the weather. "You can't. That's done. Don't call here anymore." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Mom, please, just don't." "Emily, there's nothing here for you. Goodbye." She hung up and the line went dead. The silence in the kitchen was overwhelming. I felt my hands shake as I put the phone back on the charger. The finality in her voice broke something in me. She didn't want me. She really didn't want me anymore. Tears blurred my vision as I stumbled to my room. I closed the door softly, not wanting to make any noise that might hint at my rebellion. I sat on the floor, my back against my bed, and let myself cry. The room felt smaller than ever, like a box slowly closing in on me. I heard the front door open and close, and Aunt Joyce's voice called out, "Emily, you better have finished your chores." "Yes, Aunt Joyce," I called back quickly, wiping my eyes with the back of my hand. I didn't want her to see any signs of weakness. Weakness wasn't allowed here. I went to the kitchen to help with dinner, acting like nothing had happened, but inside I felt different, emptier, more alone. Mom's final words kept playing over and over in my head. That night, Aunt Joyce found the call log on her phone. Her face twisted into a scowl as she stormed into my room, her voice a harsh whisper that cut through the quiet. "So you took my phone to call your mother. Thought you'd go behind my back." I froze, feeling the blood drain from my face. I just wanted to hear her voice. Aunt Joyce laughed, a harsh grating sound. "And what did that get you, huh? She doesn't want you, Emily. Even you can't deny it now." Her words were like ice, and I felt them chill me to the bone. She grabbed my arm, her grip tight and painful. "No more phone. No more pity parties. You're here because she doesn't want you. Remember that." The punishment was severe, more chores, stricter rules, and the cold shoulder from Aunt Joyce, who made sure I felt just how unwanted I was every day after that. Aunt Joyce's house had become a prison, each day dragging on heavier than the last. It was clear I was nothing but a burden to her, a nuisance she put up with only because she had to. But even that thin thread of obligation snapped one chilly morning, a year into my stay. "You're packing your bags today, Emily," Aunt Joyce announced over breakfast, her voice stern and final. I stared at her, my spoon halfway in my mouth. "What? Why?" "Your mother stopped sending money." "No money, no reason to keep you here," she replied bluntly, sipping her coffee as if we were discussing something as trivial as the weather. I felt a cold dread settle in my stomach. "So what happens to me now?" She shrugged, a cold, dismissive gesture. "Not my problem. You can go live with your grandmother. If she won't take you, then it's the orphanage." The thought of going to an orphanage terrified me, but the mention of Grandma sparked a tiny flicker of hope. I hadn't seen her since I was little, barely remembered her, but surely she wouldn't turn me away. Packing my bags felt surreal, like it was happening to someone else. I was packing up my life at Aunt Joyce's, each item a reminder of the year. I'd lost Aunt Joy. She drove me to Grandma's house, and the car ride was silent except for the hum of the engine. When we arrived, the house was smaller and cozier than Aunt Joyce's big, imposing place. Grandma was waiting at the door, her expression unreadable. "This is Emily, your granddaughter," Aunt Joy said, not bothering with any pleasantries. "I can't keep her anymore." Linda stopped, paying Grandma no more attention. Grandma looked me over, her eyes sharp but not unkind. "I see. Come in, Emily." Aunt Joyce didn't stay long. With a brief nod, she left, her duty to me discarded as easily as she had gotten rid of me. Inside Grandma's house was warm and filled with a scent of cinnamon and something sweet baking. It felt welcoming, a stark contrast to Aunt Joyce's cold, sterile environment. "You'll be staying in the guest room, I suppose. We'll need to sort out some more permanent arrangements," Grandma said as she led me down the hall. The guest room was small, with a window overlooking the garden. It felt safe, a feeling I hadn't associated with a place in a long time. "Thank you, Grandma," I said quietly, still unsure of my welcome. She nodded. "We're family, Emily. You belong here more than anywhere else." Over the next few weeks, I adjusted to life with Grandma. It was different. She was strict, but there was a kindness to her rules and a gentleness in her reprimands. "You need to do your chores, Emily. Everyone contributes here," she would remind me, but her tone was patient, not harsh. "Yes, Grandma," I would respond, grateful for her fair approach. Living with Grandma, I began to heal. I found comfort in the quiet routine of our days, the peaceful nights, and the steady rhythm of life that was so different from the chaos with Aunt Joy. The months passed, and on my 19th birthday, Grandma made a decision that would change everything. Over breakfast, she slid an envelope across the table to me. "Take a look at this, Emily," she said, her voice carrying a mix of seriousness and warmth. I opened the envelope and pulled out some official-looking papers. "What's this?" "It's adoption papers, Emily. I want to adopt you, make things official so no one can ever make you feel unwanted again," she explained, watching me closely for my reaction. I felt a lump in my throat. "Really, Grandma? You mean it?" "Yes, I do. You're not just staying here, Emily. You're my family, and it's time we made that clear to everyone else, too." 2 weeks later, it was done. We went to court, and I officially became Emily Bennett, with a new sense of belonging that I had longed for since Mom sent me away. With Grandma's support, I finally felt like I was home. I began looking forward to the future, and Grandma encouraged me to focus on my studies, especially science, which had always fascinated me. "You've got a sharp mind for it, Emily. You could go into medicine. How would you like that?" she suggested one day as we were going over some of my school projects. "I love that, Grandma. I want to help people," I replied, the idea starting to take root. "That it's settled. We'll get you into a good college program. I'll support you every step of the way," she declared with determination. True to her word, Grandma was there for me throughout my high school years. She tutored me in math and science using her old-school methods that were strict but effective. "You need to understand the basics, Emily. You can't skip the foundation," she'd insist whenever I struggled with complex problems. I graduated with top marks thanks to her unwavering support. Grandma then helped me navigate the daunting college application process. When I got accepted into a medical college with a partial scholarship, She was as proud as if she'd received the acceptance herself. "We'll manage the finances, don't you worry about that," Grandma said when I fretted over the costs. "You focus on your studies and become the best doctor you can be." Medical school was tough but fulfilling. I was drawn to oncology, the branch of medicine that deals with cancer. It was hard both emotionally and intellectually, but it felt right, like I was exactly where I needed to be. I completed my degree, then my internship, and finally my residency, each step a milestone that Grandma celebrated. "You're making a real difference, Emily. I'm so proud of you," she'd say, her eyes shiny with pride. By the time I turned 35, I was fully established in my career as an oncologist. My life was busy but fulfilling, filled with long hours at the hospital and the satisfaction of knowing I was making a difference. Through it all, Grandma was my anchor, always there to listen and offer advice on tough days. But life, as it often does, threw another curveball my way. Grandma's health, which had been declining, took a sudden turn for the worse. It was swift and unexpected, the kind of decline that leaves you scrambling to catch your breath. I remember coming home one evening, tired after a particularly tough day at the hospital. Grandma was sitting in her favorite armchair, looking out the window. Her voice was weaker when she called me over. "Emily, come sit with me for a bit," she said, patting the chair next to her. I sat down and took her hand in mine. It felt fragile, like it could break with too much pressure. "I'm not going to beat around the bush," she started, her tone serious. "The doctors say there's not much time left. We need to talk about practical things." A lump formed in my throat, and my eyes filled with tears. "Grandma, please." She squeezed my hand, her grip still strong. "No tears now, Emily. We've got things to sort out. You need to be ready." The next few weeks were a blur of doctor's visits, late nights, and legal paperwork. Grandma wanted to make sure everything was in order for me, that there would be no complications with her estate or her wishes. When the end came, it was peaceful. Grandma passed away in her sleep at home, just as she had wanted. The emptiness left by her passing was overwhelming, and the silence in the house felt too heavy to bear at times. Planning the funeral was hard. I went through her address book, calling relatives and friends. The responses were polite, some even warm, but it became clear that not many would make the effort to come. My heart ached not just for the loss of Grandma, but for the loneliness of this farewell. The funeral day was quiet, the chapel more empty than full. I stood there, feeling oddly detached as the priest spoke about life, loss, and legacy. It didn't take long after the funeral for the past I thought I had left behind to come knocking at my door. My mother, stepfather, and their daughter, who was now 21 years old, showed up unexpectedly. My mother didn't waste any time. "Emily, you need to share the inheritance your grandmother left you," she demanded, her tone entitled. I stared at them, disbelief mixing with anger. "You left me, remember? 21 years ago, you decided I was too much of a burden." My mother's face twisted into a sneer. "Ungrateful girl. Now you're a rich doctor with an inheritance. You owe us." I laughed, the sound bitter. "Grandma adopted me legally. You owe nothing to me now." The shock on her face was almost comical. My stepfather, ever the bully, leaned in. "You're going to regret this, Emily." As they left, I slammed the door behind them, the click of the lock sounding unusually satisfying. Standing there, my back against the door, I felt a mix of relief and renewed determination. A few days after their visit, I was at work when I got a call from a neighbor. "Emily, it looks like your family's at your house again. They've been bringing in furniture. It looks like they're moving in or something." When I pulled into the driveway, seeing their car parked out front made my stomach turn. I walked in to find my mother, stepfather, and stepsister unpacking boxes in the living room, acting like they owned the place. "What are you doing?" I demanded, trying to keep my voice steady. My mother turned around, feigning surprise. "Oh, Emily, we're just settling in. After all, this is family property." "No, it's not. This is my house, legally left to me by Grandma. You need to leave now." My stepfather stepped forward with a smirk on his face. "Make us. We're family, and we deserve a part of this house." I could feel the anger rising inside me. "You haven't been family for over 21 years. You can't just come here and claim what's mine." My stepsister, who had been watching from the side, finally spoke up. "Come on, Emily, don't be so heartless. We're just asking for what's fair." "Fair?" I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. "What's fair about abandoning a child? What's fair about only showing up when you think there's money to be had?" They had no answers, just scowls and muttered curses. "I'm calling the police," I declared, pulling out my phone. My mother tried to stop me. "You'll regret this, Emily. I've regretted knowing you for years. This is nothing new." I shot back as I dialed 533. The police arrived quickly. I explained the situation, showing them the legal documents proving my ownership of the house and Grandma's will. The officers were firm. "You need to leave," one of them told my mother and stepfather. "This property doesn't belong to you, and if you don't comply, you'll be removed forcibly." My stepfather glared at me, his anger clear, but there was nothing he could do. "This isn't over, Emily," he threatened as they gathered their things. "Oh, but it is," I replied, my tone cold and final. After they were gone, I walked through the house, Grandma's house. Each room was filled with memories, each corner a testament to her love and the life she had built here. A life she had fought to pass on to me. Standing in her favorite spot by the window, I made a promise, not just to her but to myself. I would not let the bitterness of the past tarnish my future. I had fought hard to become who I was, and I would continue to fight to honor her legacy and the sacrifices she had made for me.